Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and welcome to my series of CSM interviews. By the time you listen to this, all of the interviews will have been conducted, as I wanted to make sure that all the questions were asked of all the participants before the questions were made public. Hopefully this will serve to make sure that the interview platform is a relatively balanced one, as no candidate has been able to sit down and really research and prepare an answer in advance. Everything that the people answer here is going to be off the cuff. In order to give a bit of background as to who I am and what relation I have with the CSM, I've served on the previous 3 terms and am not planning to run for CSM 14. However, I wanted to lend my expertise, at least to some degree, to the election process, and I thought that the best way to do this was to highlight some specific candidates who I thought were interesting and had captured some level of public support. Anyway, with all that said, let's swiftly switch focus over to the subject of our interview. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you've decided to run for the CSM?
All right, so my name is obviously Vily. That's the main character that most people would know me from. Some people may know me as Robert Catrix from back in 2007, 2008 era, but most people know me as Vily. I'm currently the military director, I guess you would say, of Test Alliance Please Ignore. And most people know me from Test Alliance Please Ignore, as it's definitely been a much more public role than I've typically held. So many other people know me from my 5 years that I spent within Goonswarm as one of the original 3FCs that kind of made the original CFC what it was. Obviously, I've got history before that as well with Mercenary Coalition, Razor, and a variety of entities. But obviously, Goonswarm and Test have been the two big ones. I'm choosing to run for the CSM primarily and first and foremost to represent Legacy Coalition and to ensure that we have a clear voice and a clear voice for both nullsec and everyone in the game in terms of trying to just make sure the environment we choose to play in is good, make sure it's better, make sure it's properly maintained, make sure it's new, exciting, and that poor decisions aren't being made without the proper knowledge base, I guess you could say. I'm actually probably I am the longest running block FC in Eve, so I have a very wide breadth of knowledge, and I've literally done every single thing you can imagine in Eve aside from wormholes. So I certainly have no lack of uh, institutional knowledge about how the game is played at every level.
So, in recent years on the CSM, it's become a tradition for the CSM to present a list of points that all CSM members agree on to CSM during one of the first meetings of the summit, which is with the upper leadership of EVE Online's development team. What is a point that you would advocate for being on that list?
Proper balancing of the solve system so as to allow content and a changing flow of sovereignty and the ability for small and medium sized groups to do realistic things in time zones and ways which they would otherwise not be able to do. Partly, what I'm kind of going for there is to see components of Aegisoft uh, that were kind of promised but never really delivered on. As it currently stands, you have a situation where groups that don't, how do I put this? The mechanics of time zone tanking probably would be kind of the core way to frame it. It just basically is not intuitive to making interesting gameplay, and I would want that to be one of the things that I think needs to truly be worked at.
So, would you say that your problem is effectively that you can't create content in all time zones?
So yeah, it's something I see every day, right? So I'm currently facing an Australian time zone alliance, or an Asian time zone alliance. So certainly this is something that's fresh in my mind, and it's just perspective that I have. But if I look up north to the situation going on up there, much the same. You have two entities, neither of which are Australian, putting all of their timers into Australian time zone to try and time zone tank the timers. And I think a big component of the problem is that the strategy of alliance level warfare becomes one about making it as hellish for your opponent as possible without uh, really any thought about how to win fights versus you're just trying to make it miserable for your opponent. You're not trying to win, I guess you could say. And in my opinion, the way the system should work is that you should be forced to fight in some way if you're being attacked. There should be opportunities to create situations where all time zones are relevant.
No, that's a good way to phrase it. Thank you very much.
The old, for example, the old pause mechanics, right? Like were the premier kind of poster child for this, where even though you could, you know, ideally make sure that every timer was in your time zone, it was extremely hard to do so. And if the attacker put in work, they could ensure that the times for attacking could end up in their time zone if they put in the work. Whereas we just do not have that opportunity now.
During CSM 12, I was asked to suggest 3 areas of the game that I felt CCP would gain a lot from working on. If you had to do the same thing, what 3 areas of the game would you suggest?
Well, so
And
number
explain.
one, I would definitely say would be general ship balance. I think there is quite literally, I was doing up a kind of like a napkin math thing on. There are hundreds and hundreds of ships in Eve, and so many of them are rendered basically obsolete by simple problems. You know, why can't the Retribution have 15 more CPU? Well, the Retribution is not a good example; it's actually broken right now. But why couldn't the Vengeance have 10 more CPU? Why can't the EOS have an additional like 1,000 armor default or have a legit bonus? Why can't the Cyclone have an additional 50 speed? Like there's hundreds and hundreds of little minor balance tweaks to general ship balance that would make this game so much more interesting if you could just adjust it by tiny little bits. I know somebody over at CCP was working on it at one point, and they were doing, I can't remember what they called it, but the tier side, I believe it was. But they never finished, and they never continued with it. And to me, you could make hundreds of these changes, and they're very simple, and it would make a great difference, and it would really improve the diversity of ships you see in game, and that people can choose to and would fly. My second point would probably be, as I've said before, uh, Sov mechanics, time zone tanking, citadel mechanics, and just the way, I don't want to say cancerous, but the terribleness of being the attacker or even the defender in some cases in Sov warfare. The A lot of the mechanics just aren't fun, and they're designed to be unfun. And your defender is usually going to optimize, or defender or attacker will optimize their situation so that it's the least fun for the player. So I think CCP really needs to go back to the drawing board on some of these mechanics and adjust them so that there's just more opportunities to create engagement and content and things to do.
Okay, so that's suggestions 1 and 2. What would your third point that you would bring up be?
I don't know. If I was going to say a third one, it would actually be kind of a pet peeve of mine, which is cloaky camping. It's something that has existed in this game for a long time, but it always just annoys me that people who are literally could be 200 miles from their computer. I log in, set my cloaky camper, and then go drive a couple hours away, then come back 12 hours, 13 hours later, and my guy's still sitting there, and he has affected the game. Just doesn't feel right to me, and I don't like the way that it encourages people to play that way, where hundreds of cloaky campers are now the norm in a lot of conflicts. People should be forced to actually be at least somewhat at their computer if they're going to be creating an effect in the game.
So an important part of being a member of the CSM is being able to explain gameplay patterns or uses of mechanics that feel broken to CCP in order to show why that they're not something you feel is healthy for the game. Can you describe something that you have experience with that you perceive to be broken, or at the very least overpowered, and explain why it is in your view?
That's kind of easy. Yeah, I can definitely do that. So the current most broken mechanic that I know of in this game are Cynojammers. The old Jammer system was incredibly balanced, where you had 30 minutes to online. There were tons of interesting mechanics around it. It allowed for all kinds of gameplay, counterplay, and it gave you offender advantages, defender advantages. It was a very fun mechanic. I think I wrote a comment about it a year or two ago before they removed them. But the current Sinojammers are terrible. The brokenness of them is so bad it's almost hard to describe because they're broken on so many levels. The fact that you have a damage cap on a module that has to be reinforced to do anything in many cases is a big problem. And the damage cap means that it's 25 minutes. Then you add to the fact that that damage cap is on top of a keep star in many cases. So you're now trying to achieve a damage cap objective on a keep star, which, gets free kills anytime it presses the Doomsday button, which is never in the favor of the attacker. And then you have the fact that even if you can kill one, they can anchor another. And there's very little you can do because it's also a 5-minute online, which is below the average response time, even for the most organized of alliances. And then on top of that, you have the situation where when you start linking Sinojam systems, it becomes extremely difficult to have any mobility within an area of space. And then it gets even more annoying because even if you reinforce an in-kappa jammer, and if your enemy has any time zone control, when the jammer comes out, it automatically repairs itself, unlike the old jammers. So not only do I have to go to the system, in-cap the jammer, I then have to come back and kill it during the enemy's prime time, and if they do nothing, it will still repair.
Do you,
And that, like, there's even more to it when you start, compounding the Sino jammers with the fact that they also work in the same system as jump bridges do. So your enemy can create a situation where they can literally jump bridge in their capitals from systems away under their own Sino jammer to defend their Sino jammer.
so what would you say is the gameplay cost of this broken mechanic?
It just absolutely kills any form of higher level, or I say higher level content, capital form content around systems that are Sinogen. Well, I shouldn't say it kills it, but it allows a defender to effectively negate any capital advantage for an attacker, which creates a situation where an attacker who requires an advantage to attack loses one of the primary advantages most attackers have. And without that advantage, they have to win at every other level, which is difficult because the defender has so many other advantages.
So the CSM has to give input on many things, even on things that aren't normally thought of as coming under the CSM's purview, such as UI design. In fact, a meeting with the UI team, Team Psycho Sisters, is a part of most summits. As such, can you describe a part of the UI that you interact with heavily and identify a problem with it when used in the way that you operate it?
Well, I know for one thing, I would love if there was a working default UI to begin with. If you look in my character Vily's bio, you will find my overview settings that I have saved in my character's bio because every time my computer crashes, my overview settings are lost. Well, not every time, but like 1/4 of the times I crash or something goes wrong with my Eve client, I'll lose all my overview settings. So I literally had to save my overview settings to my bio. And it's just one of those things where the default overview settings are so terrible that they're unusable, which is why everyone uses somebody who's gone and taken the time to like spend 5 hours to set up a proper overview setting. And it's one of those things where you just, and to be honest, my overview settings that I have in my bio are like 5 years old now, so it's not something that I would push on anyone. But the overview itself is just something that really could use some love and some basic default setup, especially for newer players. It has always blown my mind that the default overview setting that we give new players is that bad. So yeah, if I wanted to talk to the UI team about anything, it would be about the overview.
Now, monetization is often a dirty word within the player base. However, as someone who's running for the CSM, I hope that you understand that it's a necessary part of CCP continuing to exist. With that said, what's a new area of monetization that you would be against, and how would you argue against it?
Okay, so obviously pay to win is always the danger of monetization and the quickest way to destroy an ecosystem. So any type of ship or ammo or anything that is money locked, I guess you could say, creates an incredible danger to the ecosystem of the game, which is entirely player built, which is why it is so successful in terms of its economic model. So if CCP told me that they wanted to, introduce this new ship that you could buy with Plex, I would hopefully try to explain to them why that either A, the ship has to be terrible so nobody buys it and can never be buffed, or B, you can't do that because it will affect the balance of the game. And the second most players get a whiff of pay to win, they're out the door because the model of Eve itself has already been corrupted a little bit by skill injectors. But once you have out and out open pay to win that is only pay to win, you will create a situation where it's just not feasible for a lot of players.
Okay, thank you.
With that being said, I am a big proponent and a big fan of fucking CCP. I'm sorry, I can't swear. Sorry. Of CCP actually being smart about their monetization. There are so many ways they could make some more money off us. They just never do. Why don't we have Citadel skins? Why don't we have like meaningful pod skins? Why have they stopped updating the fucking apparel store? Like, come on, boys. I've got some money. I'll give it to you. You just give me some good shit to buy, and don't make the skins $40. Why do they do this? People stop buying skins once you get past a certain, like, it seems crazy to me that CCP doesn't understand the market curve properly. Like you've got like the Blackfire skins were a great example of a proper price point skin set. They're great skins, and lots of people bought them, I'm sure. And then you've got these other skins that are like 700 plex for a capital skin. And I'm losing my mind at CCP because that's so expensive, and you price so many people out of the market. And I'm sure the supply demand curve is much more forgiving for skins that are in the 50 to 150. Rant over, sorry.
No worries. So, Vily, if you are elected to the CSM, how do you plan to differentiate yourself from the other candidates?
If I had to guess, I will bring all of my ability to say, uh, I am in a situation. Literally, my job is in real life is to tell people no when they want something and they want to hear yes, because that is not workable within the constraints of what we have. And it has become kind of my calling to tell people that we can't do something even when that's what they want to hear, even when that's what, the way to get the promotion is say yes. Because there's all kinds of people behind me that need me to say no so they don't get fucked by people making dumb decisions. And I like to think I've done okay at it. And I struggle to view a world, or I struggle to foresee a situation where I would be unable to tell CCP the truth, uh, as they just do not have, they don't have cards over me that would allow them to, force me. I'm willing to sit there and argue with them, I guess is what I would say. And
Okay.
I know and I know my shit well enough to know that usually when I argue, usually I'm right. So it's maybe that's not the angle I want to approach, but that's probably the angle.
So basically, you're saying you're someone who is willing to disagree with CCP no matter if it cost you, personally.
Hey, if they want to kick me off CSM because I tell them the way it is, so be it. I'm not worried about that if that's what they want to do. But I will tell them like it is, and that's just how I envision my candidacy and my term.
As someone who threatened to resign this week, that's good to hear. So, for my final directed question, what other non incumbent candidate would you most like to see elected, either alongside yourself or instead of yourself, should it come to?
So we're running 3 candidates from Legacy Coalition this year, and I'd like to see all 3 of them get on. Obviously, myself being one of them. The other 2 candidates are both Dunk Dinkle and Cornac, and I think both of them have a really clean message. They have clear, points that they want to talk about, and they both have, a wide breadth of experience, especially dealing with newer players, which is where I think the CSM needs to really have some focus over the years, or over the coming years, I should say. And I think both Cornac and Dunk would be good representatives.
Okay, Vily, well, with all that said, thank you for your time, and I'd like to give you a few moments here just to make any final remarks you'd like to on the subject, and to put a full stop on why you think the listeners should vote for you.
If you have the opportunity to vote for me, what you're voting for is the health of the game and the health of nullsec and interesting and meaningful content. That's what I'm aiming to provide. I'm aiming to take the direction I'm intending to point the CCB devs at is that direction. If you want to vote for other people, vote for other people. But that's what you're getting with my candidacy. So I would gladly take your vote, and if you are willing to give it.